Hi everyone, Petrik here and Choco Boy. Today we're going to review The Hunger of the Gods by John Gwynne. So The Hunger of the Gods is one of my most anticipated book of the year. It is my second most anticipated book of the year. And well, John Gwynne is one of my top favorite authors of all time. And yeah, The Hunger of the Gods is the second book in the Bloodsworn Saga series. And before I get to reviewing this book, I think it is mandatory for me to be talking about the cover art because Orbit and also the artist Marcus Sweeney has done a fantastic job on the cover art once again. Take a look at this. And also, I think I did an editing on the cover art of The Hunger of the Gods by including Choco's face. Yeah, I'm really thankful that a lot of you actually share this poor editing of mine. But seriously speaking, the actual cover art to both The Shadow of the Gods and The Hunger of the Gods, both of them look downright stunning. I think the realism that's portrayed on Lik Riva and Ulfrir looks incredible. Also, if it has been a while since you've read The Shadow of the Gods, do know that John Gwynne has included something super helpful for his readers, just to prove even further that he really cares about his readers. The first few pages of The Hunger of the Gods contain detailed recap of the events that happened in The Shadow of the Gods and also a character list and what happened to them before. Plus, there's also a Norse terminologies and pronunciation guide. I think these are always helpful, they are always wonderful to me, and if you're an author watching this, any authors who include this in their sequel have a bigger chance of me reading their sequel as soon as possible, rather than putting them on a backlog until their series is completed first. Now, did The Hunger of the Gods live up to my expectations? Mostly, yes. And I'm going to keep this review as spoiler-free as possible. Other than the returning 3 main POV characters from The Shadow of the Gods, I will only mention 1 new POV character and a few supporting characters. That's it. The plotline in The Hunger of the Gods starts immediately from where The Shadow of the Gods ended. The 3 main POV characters, Orca, Vark, and Elvar, from the first book have to deal with the aftermath of their respective conclusion. It is worth noting that the 3 main POV characters in The Shadow of the Gods didn't have an intersecting storyline or chapters until literally the last chapter of the book. In The Hunger of the Gods, the story, conflicts, and missions of Orca, Vark, and Elvar converge in several sections of the book. Essentially, the 3 returning main characters embark upon their own respective rescue mission. The themes of loneliness, found family, forgiveness, courage, glory, and leadership are still dominant in this brutal Norse-inspired fantasy world and series. However, Gwynne has added 2 new POV characters into The Hunger of the Gods, and I think they added the extra depth that the series needed. But before we get to that, I will tell you what I loved about Orca, Vark, and Elvar's POV first. Orca and her story arc was easily the biggest highlight of The Shadow of the Gods for me. It was a simple revenge and rescue story executed magnificently. With that book alone, Orca has become one of my favorite characters in fantasy. And it should not come as a surprise that I continue to enjoy reading Orca's POV chapters immensely here. Almost every moment of being inside her head was so delightful. Seeing her incredible strength and determination to protect what she loves remained inspiring. Technically, a few moments aside, Orca did not develop much as a character. Considering her relatively older age, prowess, and expertise in war and battles, she was already ahead in wisdom, at least when she's not too pissed, compared to many other characters in the series. But I just love reading about the relationships that she built with the other supporting characters. Plus, the battle scenes in her chapters, especially the final few chapters, were utterly breathtaking. Also, I am a big fan of the God of War video games, whether it's the Greek mythology original trilogy or the newly released Norse mythology one. I think they're all masterwork in video games, and I know John Gwynne and his family are all fans of the Norse mythology God of War video game too. That's why it genuinely made me happy when I saw this nod to the video game. To be more precise, in the game, Atreus said, "I'm sorry" to Kratos, and then Kratos replied with, "Do not be sorry, be better." And John Gwynne included this exact quote in this book. And I'm pretty sure that this is a nod to the video game. But enough about Orca, you all know how much I love Orca now. Let's talk a bit about Vark and the Bloodsworn before we move on to talking about Elvar. If you have read The Shadow of the Gods, then you will know that found family is one of the most dominant themes in Vark's story, and this is still the same case here. Although Vark's chapters were relatively less intense in this book, I think John Gwynne has successfully nailed the balance in the intense and calm moments in his chapters. Also, remember Svik's cheese story in The Shadow of the Gods? There is something similar here. This time, it is a story about how life is not fair and that is the way of the world. And although this is less humorous than the cheese story, I think this is still a great chapter. All of this does not mean that Vark's chapters were devoid of intense battle scenes. That is simply not the case, because in his chapters, especially in the middle section of the book, the guinado that happened were simply well written and also unputdownable. Elvar was the main character that took me longer than the other characters to feel invested in the Shadow of the Gods. However, I knew from the last quarter of the Shadow of the Gods that she was going to be a crucially important character in the Bloodsworn Saga, and the Hunger of the Gods just proved that. Elvar's starting and concluding chapters in this book were impactful. Witnessing how much she has developed since her first chapter in the Shadow of the Gods was undeniably satisfying to me. The theme of leadership was strong in Orca's chapters, but it's even more evident in Elvar and the Battle Grim story. Also, following the epic bloodbath in the conclusion of Elvar's story in the Shadow of the Gods, the calamity and destruction displayed in the last few chapters of Elvar's story in this book were Gwynne's epic and thrilling battle scenes at their best. As you can probably guess, Orca, Vark, and Elvar's chapters were compelling to me, but how about the two new POV characters? Well, I'm glad that John Gwynne has decided to add them into this book. Having villains POV chapters was one of the key ingredients that made the Banished Land saga so brilliant. These two POV characters added an extra layer to the narrative, and one of the things I appreciate most about one of the new POV characters, Gudvar, is this. Gwynne is doing something new that he has never done before with Gudvar's inner voice. By this, I mean that Gwynne is emulating what one of my favorite authors and series of all time did, and that is Joe Abercrombie's style on Sandan Glokta and Jezal Dan Dutar in the First Law trilogy. The arrogance, pettiness, cowardice, and humor somehow made Gudvar an intriguing character. This is good, especially considering how much I dislike his actions. But the contrast between his actions and inner thoughts was so well done. It may not be Abercrombie's level yet, but to be fair, no one can do what Abercrombie did with Glokta. But I am pleased to see Gwynne trying out new things and making it work as best as he can. So now you might wonder, why did I not give a 5 stars rating to the Hunger of the Gods? After all, I gave all of these praises already. And despite it having fewer battle scenes than Gwynne's standard in his sequels, the guinado in the middle section and the final 15% of the novel were excellent as always. However, I also have to admit that the Hunger of the Gods felt like it's filled with the infamous middle book syndrome in several sections. Remember that this is still a great book for me. I love all of the characters' POV chapters, but at roughly 210,000 words and more than 600 pages long, it seems like almost the entirety of the novel revolve around them, all the POV characters just traveling. They travel to one place and they do something there briefly, and then they travel again to another destination, and then they do something again there briefly, and this is repeated throughout the entire book. I love all the characters, the battles, and the Norse mythology world plus creatures, but having these traveling sections repeated until the end of the novel did get a bit tiresome sometimes. I strongly encourage you to use the map provided at the front of the book. It's easy to forget where each POV character is going because everyone was just constantly traveling to a place before moving on to travel again. I am actually a bit sad about this because giving John Gwynne's book, any of his books, anything below 5 stars, actually hurt me. Other than Malice, I have gave 5 stars to all of John Gwynne's books. For Wrath and A Time of Courage, I would actually give them 6 out of 5 stars if I could. So The Hunger of the Gods, I'm giving it a 4.5 stars, which is still a very high rating, by the way. I'm giving it a 4.5 stars just like I gave Malice. Yeah, I also gave Malice a 4.5 stars. Yeah, it's a bit sad, but as we all know already, none of our top favorite authors can keep a 5 out of 5 stars rating track record, well, forever. But I still love this book so much. My minor issue with the pacing aside, The Hunger of the Gods have a furious battle scenes and savage display of power. The world building was intricate and the characters were compelling. A new age of gods and swords has dawned on Vigrid. And if you're familiar with Norse mythology, I don't think it will be difficult for you to guess where the story is going just from reading The Shadow of the Gods, and so far I've been proven true. But despite this, The Hunger of the Gods is another marvel written by John Gwynne, and you know what, after that ending, I really cannot wait for the third and final book to come out. From my track record with John Gwynne, I think he's always at his best when he's writing the final book of his series, so I'm sure that this one, the final book, I think it will be titled The Battle of the Gods or The War of the Gods. Let's see if I'm proven right or not. I think that final book will be the best of the trilogy. So yeah, that's my spoiler-free review for The Hunger of the Gods. And well, if you have read this book, let me know what you think about it. And if you haven't, are you still looking forward to this book? If not, I think it really should be on your radar. And so, yeah, that's it from me today. And yeah, Choco is saying bye-bye too. Come on, Choco. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Yeah, I think he's sleepy right now. So yeah, as always, thank you so much for watching and thank you for your support. Bye-bye. Also, I would like to give a special shout out to my patrons and also my new bibliomancer, Amanda. Thank you so much for all of your support.